Hey guys, Chris Murphy here. Today, I've got a hot topic. Is there an evil conspiracy ruling the world? I've got Andy Hix with me. He's a mindfulness expert. Following on from our last interview, which was more about conspiracy theories, finding the peace with it. We're going to more focus today more on evil people, you could say. People like to put people as enemies. People maybe don't like the government. There's all sorts of issues in the world. There's wars going on. There's child trafficking. There's loads of different things. And you could say people who do this, people who abuse people are evil. Andy likes to think that these people have evil in them. And we just thought we would talk a lot about this in this talk today. In terms of practicing our compassion, also understanding how certain elements of other people are actually within ourselves. So Andy, maybe just quickly, what brings your interest to this topic? And obviously, sort of challenging my opinions on certain things as well.
Hi, everybody. I first got interested in this. Well, actually, I would say I think I can remember first getting really interested in this kind of thing when I did history at uni. And like a lot of people, I was really interested in the Nazis. And one of the reasons that the Nazis are really interesting to me is because for many people in a sort of cultural narrative of our society, they represent evil. You know, the sort of things that they did, particularly in terms of the Holocaust, are seen as like the epitome of evil, and the concentration camps basically were like hell on earth. You know, people were being tortured, people were being exterminated. They were really horrific places. And I was really curious in my studies, why did people take part? Why did the perpetrators get involved? And one of the seminal books in the history of the Holocaust and understanding the perpetrators is by Christopher Browning. It's a book called Ordinary Men. And he wrote about the Einsatzgruppen. Have you ever heard of the Einsatzgruppen?
No.
So when Germany was invading Russia, there was the soldiers who were going along and doing the fighting and the invading. And then behind them, there was a group of people whose job it was to find Polish people, communists, and any other kind of enemies of the state. Sorry, not Polish people, Jewish people, and exterminate them. So they were basically, the Einsatzgruppen were an extermination squad. And so they killed thousands and thousands and thousands of people by shooting them. And so you might think someone like that, they're going to have to be pretty hardcore Nazi, pretty hardcore anti-Semite, and quite an evil person to take part in that. And what a lot of people think is that, well, surely they were just forced to do it. And they thought, well, if I don't do it, I'll get shot. But there are actually well-documented examples of people saying they don't want to do it. And actually one particular guy said, I don't want to do this because it's so horrible. I've got children. I don't want to shoot children. And he ended up going back to Germany and getting a promotion. So they had the option to say no, and they still did it. And Christopher Browning's conclusion is not that they were evil because they came from normal backgrounds, they went to church, they had families, they were ordinary men, hence the title of the book, like you and me. And his theory is that they did it more out of a kind of peer pressure. Like, well, everyone else is doing it. You know, this is what the country is doing. This is what my friends are doing. This is what my community is doing. And they just went along with it. If everyone else is doing it, it kind of must be the right thing to do. So that's kind of where I first kind of got interested and first really started to question some of the assumptions that I think you get, which you see in films like Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? The Nazis are always just the bad guys. They're just evil. It's very embedded, I think, in our cultural narrative. And I just don't think it's true.
Yeah, and I think this is where certain things can help, maybe to an extent. I know you're not a fan of conspiracy theories, but there's lots of information you could probably look at, because conspiracy theory is sometimes just generally called something which is opposed to what we've been told. So if you go against what we've been told in history and what we've been told through the news and the media, anything else against that is considered conspiracy.
Yeah.
But it's good to challenge those beliefs and sometimes think, okay, would they really, and just ask these deeper questions and be open for debate. And what I think as I think I've come a long way, Andy, probably over the last year of maybe attaching certain people as enemies and probably letting it go slightly. But I think some people do get wound up if they're like, this is, this person's the enemy, just like with Hitler, just so focusing on him.
Yeah.
But I would say if you're a victim of that, Andy, it's a different story. If you had people who were in the Holocaust or concentration camps, people maybe survived it, people who had family members, people who have been abused, been raped or tortured, so these things happen.
Yeah, so I want to be really clear and say that they did evil things.
Yeah.
We can talk in a minute maybe about what is evil, but they did things that were despicable, that were horrific, that were malicious, deliberately causing horrific suffering on huge numbers of people. I guess the thing that I'm saying that maybe is a bit different to how other people might see it is that likelihood is if you or I were one of these guys, we would be pulling the trigger too.
Yeah, because based on the conditioning, right? If they've been born into an environment where their parents were doing the same thing to them, they watched people gun people down or whatever, then you're just part of your environment, aren't you? And I think the more you can accept this, definitely from doing the likes of therapy with myself, the more I sort of accepted the.
You do therapy with yourself?
No. Yeah, that'd be great. That would have saved me. That would have saved me a lot of
traumatic.
Yeah, that would have saved me a lot of time and money and difficult conversations with people. But yeah, I think through doing that, I think it got to the point of acceptance. And the hardest part with things like therapy is people do not want to accept, what they've been through. They're kind of quite blind. They're blind to their shadow, and your shadow is obviously. Contains those evil elements, so people go, I'm not an evil person. They're probably suppressing parts of them. What I found interesting as well was greed. I've explored greed a bit more, and I actually question, okay, you target Bill Gates or anyone like that, I'm not as greedy as them, you could say, but you are still not giving money to charity, for example, or you're not, you're saving your money and you're not giving it to anyone. So the greed is still within you. And I found that very interesting. And I think the more I make peace with that, the more I'm less at, Jeff Bezos and these kind of people. I mean, I'm curious to get your thoughts on that as well. That it comes from within, right?
My perspective on greed is greed occurs when you're trying to meet an emotional need with something that doesn't meet the need. So say what you really need is like more closeness, more intimacy, people who really know you, really understand you, that you feel like you can depend on. That's what you really need. But you don't have that. So you're just like, well, I'm just going to make as much money as I can. How much money does it take to meet the need for intimacy? Like an infant, you can never be enough. So you'll just want to have more and more and more and more money and never be satisfied. So that's how I try to not judge people who I perceive as greedy, because I actually feel sorry for them. I feel compassion for them, because I think you're trying to meet an emotional need with something that's never going to do the job. Same with excessive eating. When people become obese, I think it's because they're trying to numb the pain, or they're trying to meet an emotional need through the food, which the food will never meet.
100%. Yeah, I mean, they're great lessons straight away. I mean, obviously it's very hard, and I think we get triggered very much, and I think, very quickly. And I think the reason we get triggered for people who are very rich, for example, is because we want to have more money, or we think that will bring us happiness, and that's why. Because if we knew it deep within our hearts that wouldn't bring us happiness, we wouldn't really judge people. And what I found interesting, people I know who are good at sales, for example, or they're good with money, they don't judge billionaires. They don't judge other salespeople, because they're comfortable in themselves and they understand maybe that energy, which I found quite important as well.
I also question. I think that a worldview that a lot of people have, which links to conspiracy theories, is the idea that certain powerful people are controlling the world. It's all being run in their interests. And even if it's not necessarily a conspiracy, you could say, well, people like Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, in a very kind of open way, are running the world or running the economy or running their companies in a way that isn't really in the majority of people's interest, but is massively in their interest because they're becoming so rich from it. And so in that way, it's a kind of a conspiracy, like a small group of people taking advantage of the masses. But my perspective on that is actually that, for the average guy, the system we have isn't working. It's not meeting our needs. I also don't think it is for the rich guys. I don't think most of them are happy. I think they, as I said, that there's the greed thing of trying to meet these emotional needs that they're not having met. I also think that they end up feeling very isolated because they can't trust that people actually want to be friends with them as a human being, because they always think, oh, is it just because of my money? Like, and including people that they have romantic relationships with, they just want to marry me for my money. And I think one of the things that we most want as humans is to feel belonging, to feel like we're the same as other people. And when you're mega rich, you don't. And you also don't feel very safe. You feel like, because you've got so much you need to protect. You've got this huge empire, which, someone could steal, or someone could build a better company and take it all away from you. So you've got all this anxiety about losing what you've got, because you've got so much to lose. So I don't think that actually the rich people are the winners. I think that no one is the winner in our current situation. It's in everyone's interest for us to change it.
100%, yeah. And if anything, they would probably give, an arm and a leg to have what we have, if we have this love that they're missing. And I think the overall purpose is to have the gratitude for that, and let go and practice that deeper level of compassion.
So what do you think about conspiracy then? Do you think, is there a group that's running the world?
Yeah, well, I mean, I question where everything comes from, right? And if you think the so-called system serves those people that we've just mentioned, you've got to look at the whole, and where it's going. But I would say that, yeah, I do feel that that's where it comes from. Like, I think it's it's more the force of the planet. I mean, what was interesting when I went to Glastonbury, I smoked some weed, and I didn't. That's probably since my ayahuasca, I had like a bit of a trip, and what I learned was that, in a way, that's kind of how the world has to be balanced. To have that maybe darker energy ruling the planet, so that things are in balance, so that we know who we really are. Because if it was pure love and abundance, then we wouldn't know who we were. Does that make sense?
Do you think it's like a small group of people, like the board of a company, or like a?
I do believe in that. I mean, I've looked into a lot. Yeah, there are secret family societies. I think when stuff like with the banking system, when that was created, it comes from a handful of people, and these families are quite underground. Like Rockefellers and Rothschilds and people like that. And I just find it all very interesting. What's that? I do think family people like that are. Yeah, I think people who are based on what I've seen on my ayahuasca ceremonies, I think there are like satanic forces, and these sort of things. Although a lot of people won't look into it, but this stuff does exist and it is real.
So what is a satanic force, and what is evil? Do you think? What does it mean?
Now this is a good question. I would say that I don't know, because based on this was because I spoke to some shaman, and I've had friends. Now there's the two different reasons. Either it's all part of us, and evil and satanic force or whatever is part of the collective. It's like part of us. It's a tiny element of us which has gotten out of control, or it's not a part of us and it's like an alien force, or it's some, it's separate from us. and it's like we're kind of against it in a fight. Um, but I'm still not really sure, and I think that's where I get lost, because I can't, as I'm sure you've probably talked about before, I can't see, struggle with that, having that compassion for some, you know, someone who's abused like loads of children or something, like how can you develop compassion for them? You can say, well, it's what they've been through, but why does it exist to that certain extent? So that's the kind of thing that I struggle with. And it, like you said, it does, you say, well, is there darker forces or what on the planet? Well, how about like people like Jeffrey Epstein, who, is still being covered up? A lot of the people who are involved with that, it doesn't come out. So, when I sort of say the secret families, I believe that there is that kind of, it's in Eyes Wide Shut. Have you seen that with Tom Cruise?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, you can sort of see that they're behind like the media, and they just know everyone, don't they? They can take people out. So I believe that's the kind of levels that's leak, beneath the surface. But again, this is just like coming from, thinking of a hierarchy, like you've got top people and it comes down. It's just how we sort of function in this world and what we believe to be true, So I found it interesting. I think I've looked into it a lot. I don't think, for example, you've probably looked into it that much. So I think sometimes people are limited.
I've not spent a lot of time investigating conspiracy theories.
But do you find it interesting though to know why things are happening? Like right now, who's actually deciding, or that we should be in tier 4 and stuff like that? I do believe that there are groups of people behind the scenes who decide that, and I believe they're not in the best place mentally. I believe there's a lot of darker or evil in them. And it's like yesterday in Floatworks, I told you where I work. The police and everyone just came in. They're like, "We've got to shut you down," and we're like, "Well, we've been told we can stay open." And they're like, they're all saying, "Well, it's not from me; it's come from above." The police said that, the council said that. So it's like, where's it actually coming from? And then people are carrying, like we talked about in the wars, right? People like just following orders. Where the orders coming from?
Yeah.
And is that actually a good place where it's coming from? I don't think so. I think you'd find governments actually trigger a lot of people.
So,
but do you see where I'm coming from with this? It's like, yeah, maybe I don't know what people are finding with this interview so far, but I thought it'd be interested.
The people, it's not clear who's actually pulling the strings. And the people who are pulling the strings, they're doing it in their own kind of narrow self-interest.
Yeah, I can't name specific people. I think that's what was interesting when I interviewed Dev Lester. He said that's kind of the James Bond films have done. You've got one enemy, and it's them. But you kill that enemy, and someone else appears. So at the moment, maybe it's Bill Gates. You get rid of Bill Gates, there'll be someone else. Just get rid of Donald Trump, whoever's next, Biden or whatever. People want to put all of their frustrations. But I think it's a collective of like various, say, bankers and all these other people who want more power. But the overall point is, I think it's the collective consciousness of the planet. And the power seems to lie with people who are more, perhaps got evil in them, in my opinion. But I also think they're great. They're good people as well. Working behind the scenes, helping to be a better world. But when I went to Nepal, for example, you see such loving and peaceful people, and they're just like, we don't want anything. We just want to sit and relax. We want to watch the world go by. All right, what do you think about
that? Well, just to come back to this question of what is evil, like to me, an evil act is like something where you're deliberately trying to harm someone else. Like if you accidentally harm someone, that's not evil, right? If you deliberately harm someone, then there's different scales of it. You could like pinch someone and want to hurt them a little bit, or you could like torture them to death, and both of them are harm, but they're obviously there's a huge different range of how bad the harm can be. And I guess when I think about someone who is just an evil person, then what I think of is, at your core, you are someone who takes pleasure in harming other people for your own benefit. And there is nothing kind of beneath that. That is your essence. Maybe there's a bit of good in you. Maybe there's part of you that sometimes does nice things for other people. But fundamentally, that's like, that's who you are. And I really don't think there are many, if any, people who are certainly born like that. Maybe there are some people who they're so abused that they completely lose touch with any sense of any goodness inside them. But I think for the vast majority of people, when they're hurting other people, and this is what happens in my experience when I'm either hurting someone or wishing someone ill, it's because I'm hurting. It's because I'm upset. It's because I'm in pain, and there's some kind of deluded part of me. This is not true. The deluded part of me thinks by doing harm to this person, I'll feel better. You know, by taking revenge, I'll feel better. Or by putting this person down, I'll feel superior, and then I'll feel.
Yeah. So these are all parts of us. We do this every day. Everyone does it, you know. And I think the people who struggle to grow are the people who don't realize that they do that. You know, they're not self-aware.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, that's not me. I don't do that. But then they get so frustrated when someone else is doing it, you know.
Yeah.
And I think whatever's happening in what we're triggered by in other people is a reflection of what we're doing, you know. And I think, you know, recently, like, people who don't take action and complain a lot and blah, 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 that irritates me a lot. But I realize that I do that as well. And you know, and I think now it's like I want to, for example, be around more people who are just taking action, because I know the people, if you're around people who don't, it just irritates you all the time.
It's frustrating. Yeah, so I think in our culture we're too quick to jump to thinking, well, you're just evil. We're too quick to using that as an explanation without looking deeper at why. And I think that there is a really one of the explanations for why we do that is because it's so ingrained in our culture. You know, how many storylines have we seen, TV, books, films, where it's good versus evil? That is the essence of almost all the stories that you consume, that we consume in our culture. Good versus evil, right? And how often do you get to find out why is the evil person evil? It's so rare, isn't it?
Well, you know what's interesting, like with Star Wars, you know, like some of the biggest films like that, where the ending is beautiful, right? Isn't it? Because it's like having compassion and forgiveness, where Luke's like forgives his father, right?
You find out why Darth Vader became evil. I can't remember.
He turned to the dark side, right?
Why did
are these great questions you're asking me, or are you just generally curious?
I genuinely don't
remember. Well, basically it's like, you know, there's the dark side of the Force, right? Which he's dragged to because he wants more power, and, you know, but then he obviously realizes it won't fully satisfy him. But then it's like, okay, I can see that. But then there's the evil emperor or whatever who converts him into the dark side. And then you would say, well, he's evil. But then it's like, you know, developing your level of compassion for him.
Have you seen Joker?
Yes. Yeah. And again, that's a great one for compassion. If anything, at the end of the film, you're actually more on his side than Batman or, you know.
You are, and I think that's one of the films which does the best job of showing how someone could become, in quotes, evil, in the sense of, like, he stops caring about killing people. He doesn't care about murdering people anymore. And you see him being humiliated, losing his job, being beaten up, you find out he's got a mental illness, he has his medication taken away, he has his therapist taken away. And there's just and you find out he was horrifically abused as a child as well. And so you see all of these different things, and you're like, yeah, well, it totally makes sense why someone like that would end up murdering people. And as you say, you end up feeling like, I empathize with this person, I care about this person more than Batman. It's so rare for a film to do that. You know, all the Bond films, for example, Voldemort, they're just evil. You never find out why, so you don't care about them. And so when the bad guy defeats them, you're like, yeah, kill them, get them in prison, lock them up forever because they deserve it because they're evil. And so we're so used to seeing the world in that kind of black and white way that we very quickly see the people around us in that way. And for example, many people that I know think of Trump and his supporters as evil, and Nigel Farage and his supporters as evil.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I mean that's a quite one, but I think sort of like the media and the stuff like that were to blame for that. Just like the whole Trump thing was just, I don't even think people knew why they were really angry at him. It's just what you're being told. Cool, Andy. Well, I don't like to wrap these interviews up because I know I keep it shorter for YouTube. So I think what I've learned in this interview though is good, because I think overall, I think it's more the force, like I can see more sort of a darker force or spirits, or, rather than saying they're evil people. So I found that quite interesting.
I think
that's sort of my take on it.
We've all got the capacity to be like Satan, and we've all got the capacity to be like an angel.
And you're always going to get people who fall into all the different categories.
And from one moment to the next, like one moment I can be really, really loving, and the next moment someone pisses me off, and I'm like, I want to fucking kill you. I hate you. Can I just share one story to finish?
Go for it.
So there was once a samurai who went to a monk and said, "Monk, can you tell me the difference between heaven and hell?" And the monk says to the samurai, I'm not going to bother, because a bone-headed samurai like you would never understand. Samurai is furious. He's so offended at how rude the monk has been that he raises his sword as if he's about to cut off the head of the monk. And the monk says, "That is hell." And when the samurai realizes that the monk has risked his life to teach him about what hell is, he's so overcome and humbled with gratitude that he drops his sword, kneels down, and kisses the monk's feet. And the monk says, "That is heaven."
Wow. Yeah, no, always good. These are always good stories you've got at the end. I think pretty much summarizes all of that. So yeah, no, it's good. I think the overall thing is finding a lot of peace in the situation. And if you can find yourself very much labeled like this is an evil person or whatever, it's kind of like a bit of maybe laziness, I guess, as well. But it's a very difficult practice, and obviously you've done this for a while. I have as well. I stayed in like a monastery for a month, and compassion was like the thing we learned the whole time. So there's lots in this. So just advise everyone watching to keep an open mind, and be good to get your thoughts in the comments if you've got any other thoughts. Me and Andy will be chatting, I'm sure, again soon. So yeah, Andy, it's been a great chat, and yeah. Anything else to add?
I would just say one little tip is, if you find yourself judging someone, you find yourself hating someone or thinking they're evil, can you just ask yourself, what might it be like to be in their shoes? What might have happened to them in their life to make them say that or do that? Just try to have a moment where you see things from their perspective.
Yeah, that's amazing, Andy. Thanks for finishing on that. And that makes me realize as well, I think sometimes you forget that. It's like every time someone reminds me of that kind of advice, you think, well, I've just been forgetting about that advice for the last 2 weeks. And then you come back to it. And then when you use that advice, you find a lot more peace, I find. Cool, Andy. All right. I will see you soon, man.
Cheers, Chris. Bye.